Okay folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, and welcome back to part 2 of our winter tree identification series. The tree that's behind me now is a sycamore. Sycamore is fairly easy to identify. Don't let the peeling bark confuse you, because it does have bark peeling off on the lower areas of the tree, much like the hickory bark peels. But as you look up the tree, it will be very, very bone white, almost antler color white. As it goes up, with just a little bit of mottled color of that gray bark that hasn't fallen off, a little bit like urban camouflage. But it's a very easy tree to identify. It grows fairly straight and very tall. It grows around water. Most of the time it's a water indicator tree. Sycamore is a very close-grained hardwood tree, and it was a prized carving wood for things like kitchen utensils because it was so robust. You can see I walk around with what I call my pocket project. It's kind of like a geek's pocket protector. This is a woodcrafter's pocket project. And I walk around with a spoon. This one's made of birch in my pocket, so when I'm taking a break or not doing anything, I'm sanding or whittling on a spoon. That's what I'm doing to learn the craft of spoon making, is making a new one every other day or every day and finishing it the next day, so that I'm trying to make, you know, at least 20-25 spoons over the next month to own that skill, so that I can do it without thinking about it and develop that muscle memory of fine carving techniques to make utensils. So this is the sycamore. Okay, so this bad boy here is a black cherry. There's quite a few of them in this area around me. And I'm going to show you up close one piece of bark that I use that a lot to identify black cherry. But black cherry's got a really rough bark on it. But it has one feature that you can see right here where the bark's dished out and it's gray. And I'm going to show you that. That's indicative of the cherry. This is a very, very praised or prized carving wood. Okay, so it's not good for a lot of things. It's a very hard wood. But it is a good carving wood for making things that are going to have longevity. So I'm going to show you up close on this bark real quick so you can see it, so you understand what black cherry bark looks like, because there are a lot of them in eastern woodlands. All right, hopefully you guys can see this right here, where this bark's kind of peeled up and dished out, and it's gray. That's very indicative of cherry trees to do that. You see how that's kind of dished out right there? And they are brown on the inside, really dark brown color on the inside when you knock the bark off of them. But there's lots of trees that are like that as well. But this bark, you can see there's poison ivy growing all over this thing, but this dishing of the bark like that is what I use to identify the black cherry. Okay, this is a maple. And again, I'm not trying to get too species specific and stay with families, although I have pointed out a couple oddballs like the shingle oak and the tulip poplar. But long striations within a gray bark, a lot of times it'll be mottled with some type of growth of lichen on the side of it, like this one is here. When they're small, they really don't look much different than this. They can be a little bit slick as far as the bark goes, but they almost always have that twist to them. Okay, as it grows up, you can see that twist. Now this is something that you want to pay attention to if you're harvesting wood to create a project. If the bark on the outside of the tree, like this one, is twisted, you know the grain on the inside is going to be twisted as well. So if you are cutting a tree down to make a project that you need a nice straight grain, a tree like this one in particular is not going to be it. Now there are maples with straight grain in them, don't get me wrong, but a lot of maples get wind twisted because of where they grow. Osage orange is another example of something that gets wind twisted real easy, and the grain will be really twisted up inside the tree. So you have to be careful of what you harvest. Maple's another tree like that. But as they get big, maple's a very majestic tree. Maple's also classic for rotting from the inside out. So you'll see a hollow tree that'll be completely dead looking to you at the bottom, but it will still be growing leaves in the upper branches, and that's because the tree's not dead. The parasites have gotten into the tree and it's started to die on the inside where the tree's already dead anyway. That whole area of the inside of the tree where the heartwood is already dead. So the insects and stuff will eat that in a maple tree, get in through an open wound and eat that out of the maple tree. And the whole inside of that tree will be hollow, but the outside will still be a live, living tree. Maples are notorious for that. So if you see a hollow tree in the woods that's still growing, chances are that's a maple. There's a close-up of that maple bark for you so you can see a little bit better what it looks like up close. So this is another maple tree, and I'm showing you this because I want you to see the long striated gray bark on there, but it also has areas where the bark's almost slick right here, where there's no striations and the bark is just almost slick. As you go up the tree, there's different, and the younger trees will look like that. They'll be very slick in the bark like that with the gray and white mottling. And as they grow, they'll start to split and furrow. So you know when you see a young maple, it's usually going to have slicker bark on it, whereas your young hickory trees will already have those striations in the bark. Maples don't get that until they get bigger. And again, I'm not trying to be species specific, more family specific with these trees. Okay guys, this is dogwood, flowering dogwood. And you can see these squares or rectangles of bark. That is your identifying feature of dogwood. The small ones have it, the big ones have it. All dogwoods are going to have bark like that. It's not a large growing tree. Only grows 20 or 30 feet. White flowers in the summertime. Very, very hard wood. Good for the root spalls and things like that. Are great for making mallets out of. And fro mallets, as well as larger mallets that you can use for splitting wedges and things like that. Dogwood is great wood for that. And there's lots of them in this area. And they generally grow along trails or at the edge of woodland areas. Sometimes they're planted as an ornamental in people's yards, but in the wild, that's usually where they grow, is around the edge of a meadow or along the edge of a trail where they can get plenty of sunlight. So there's a real good close-up of that dogwood bark. So you can see those squares of bark there. Okay, this tree is the American beech. And I have American beech and I have blue beech out here, or musclewood. But any beech is a hardwood tree. But it has a very, very slick bark with no furrowing in it whatsoever. This one's got some white spots all over the bark, but it's very easy to recognize this tree in a group of other trees because, again, there's absolutely no furrowing in the bark. It's almost completely slick and it's gray in color. I want to stop and show you guys this real fast while we're walking around. This is a hickory, and you can see how the bark's starting to split off of it already. And this one's only about probably 6 inches, 5 inches in diameter, and the bark's already starting to come up on the sides of it. So these hickory trees are pretty easy to identify once they get any size to them at all. But again, remember what I said about the branches and how they grow in part 1 of this series. Okay guys, here's a real good example of how those maples get hollowed out on the inside by insects. This thing is completely eaten out on the inside, and you can see as we go up the tree, those areas where the bark is slick, but you have furrows in it. And as you go up the tree, you can see those areas that are slick, just like the other maple we looked at. And this thing's definitely alive. It's got fresh branches coming off of it that had leaves on them this year. But this thing is completely hollowed out at the bottom. Okay, this is a black willow, and this is kind of one of those oddball trees of the willow family, but it's the main willow that grows in this area of the eastern woodlands. It always grows around water, so if there's not water real close or in it, it's not a willow most likely. There's water 10 feet from me right now. There's a stream, and there's no doubt that it comes clear up here on this high on the bank a lot during the wet season. So this thing's growing right next to water. It's got lots and lots of small branches coming out of it. It has a dark black furrowed bark, and it very rarely ever grows straight, and it will always have the largest part of the trunk trying to lean toward wherever the sun's at. Wherever it can get the most sun, that's where it tries to grow. And with this tree, it's come up, growing almost in a northerly direction, and then bent itself back southeast to get that sun. The sun's over here now, and it's in the afternoon. It came up over here this morning, and that's where that trunk is bent right around to get that sun up in the top of the canopy. So these black willows do that a lot, I've noticed. Okay, so this is river birch. And just like any other birch tree, it has bark that flakes off of it in sheets, although the river birch is a lot smaller sheets than some of the other types of birch. This birch almost always grows really close or in water. You can see that this one is actually sitting in water right now. It's growing in a stream, and there's a couple more right beside it. It's a water indicator, obviously, because of that, but it is a very good carving wood. It's also a great tinder. So river birch is good to be able to identify, and again, it's almost a no-brainer. You find that flaking reddish orange rust colored bark, it's river birch. Well, folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with the Pathfinder School and Self-Reliance Outfitters. I thank you for joining me today for part 2 of tree identification in the winter months. I would suggest you go out and get yourself a couple field guides and go out in the woods and start identifying trees. Field guides like Peterson's, the Audubon Society's North American Trees is good. There's one called Trees of Ohio, a field guide, which is very good. Anything that will show you the bark, the leaves, as well as fruit and nuts and things like that the tree produces are going to be a good field guide for you. Trees are the ultimate resource. We've been using wood for thousands and thousands of years. Trees and the different species of trees can be used for lots and lots of different things depending on the task that you need that wood for. Whether it's medicine, food, or construction materials, it's very species specific. So you need to be able to identify these trees in all months of the year. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all of our instructors, sponsors, affiliates, and friends, and I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.